My name is Rachel Miller. I am 33 years old, a registered nurse, and I am standing in my own dining room on Thanksgiving Day with 12 pairs of eyes locked on me. The sting on my left cheek is so sharp, it feels like fire, the heat spreading down my neck. My husband, Daniel Miller, age 38, stands over me, his right hand still raised from the slap he just delivered. He is breathing hard, his face red, and his expensive shirt collar is slightly askew from the sudden movement. Around the table, his family members react in their usual way. His mother Margaret watches with that faint, satisfied smile I have seen too many times. His sister Susan smirks as if to say, "Finally." His older brother Victor chuckles under his breath, shaking his head like I somehow deserved it. A couple of cousins look stunned but do nothing. They never do. No one moves to help me. No one says my name. In that moment, with the smell of roast turkey heavy in the air and the soft clink of cutlery gone still, I know I am completely alone in this house. Daniel leans toward me, his voice low and full of venom. "Do not ever embarrass me in front of my family again." It is the same voice he uses late at night when no one can hear, the same tone that has frozen my blood for the past year. I force myself to keep my eyes on him, not to look down, not to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Out of the corner of my eye, I catch movement by the far window. My 10-year-old daughter Emma is standing there, clutching her tablet to her chest. She has my eyes, dark, watchful, too old for her age. She has been quiet all evening, sitting at the kids' table in the corner, drawing on her tablet. Or so I thought. She steps forward now, her sneakers silent on the hardwood floor. Her gaze is locked on Daniel with an intensity that makes him shift his weight slightly, his shoulders tightening. "You shouldn't have done that," she says. Her voice is steady, calm, and in this room full of adults, it somehow carries the most authority. Daniel blinks, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" he demands, his voice sharper than before. But there is a tremor in it. Emma tilts her head just a little, studying him. The way I have seen her study insects in the garden, curious, analytical, unblinking. Because now Grandpa is going to see. The air in the room changes instantly. Margaret's smug expression falters. Susan's smirk disappears. Victor frowns confused. Daniel's eyes dart to me, then back to Emma. "What?" His voice is thinner now, the authority draining from it. "I've been recording you, Dad," Emma says, her small fingers tightening on the tablet. "Everything. For weeks." She glances briefly at me, then back at him. "And I sent it all to Grandpa this morning." The words land like a physical blow. Daniel's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. Margaret turns toward her son, her voice sharp now. "Daniel, what is she talking about, Susan?" And Victor exchange a quick look, something uneasy passing between them. For the first time in over a year, I see something I have not seen in Daniel's face: fear. He steps toward Emma, but she does not back away. Grandpa says hi. She adds, her voice still calm, her eyes still locked on him. And he's on his way. At that, Daniel actually takes a step back. Around the table, chairs scrape as people shift uncomfortably. Victor clears his throat. Susan looks away. Margaret is staring at her son like she has never seen him before. I do not know exactly what Emma means yet. I do not know what she has done. But I know my father, Jack Miller, a retired police detective with 3 decades on the force. I know what it means when he is on his way. For the first time in a long time, something sharp and hot stirs in my chest. It is not fear. It is hope. 1 year earlier, I believed I had finally found peace. Daniel was everything I thought I wanted: educated, successful, confident. As a lawyer, he knew how to speak with charm, how to win people over in seconds. When we met at a charity fundraiser at the hospital, he treated me like I was the most fascinating person in the room. After years of raising Emma on my own and working double shifts in the ER, his attention felt like a gift I had earned. I was wrong. In the beginning, his protectiveness felt flattering. He offered to drive me to and from work, saying he worried about me walking alone at night. He insisted on helping with my bills even before we were engaged, telling me I deserved to rest for once. But small boundaries began to erode. He asked me to stop meeting certain friends claiming they were a bad influence. He discouraged me from working overtime, saying Emma needed me home more, yet when I was home, he often ignored us both. The first real warning came 3 months after our wedding. I had forgotten to iron one of his shirts for a client meeting. He didn't yell at first. He just looked at me with that slow, cold smile I would come to know too well and said, "Rachel, I don't like being disappointed." Later that night, he threw the shirt in the trash in front of me. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. By then, I had already met his family, and they made it clear they didn't think I was good enough for him. Margaret greeted me with air kisses and questions about my education in the same tone one might use to ask about the weather. Susan smiled while reminding me she had gone to a proper university. Victor openly joked that Daniel had married down. Emma noticed. She always notices. She never liked Daniel's family, especially after they made comments about her father, my ex, being absent for a reason. I tried to shield her from the worst of it, but she saw more than I wanted. What kept me in place was the knowledge that Daniel knew the law. He knew how to control a narrative, how to hide behind his professional reputation. If I ever left, I feared he could twist things to make me look unstable, unfit to keep Emma. He hinted at it more than once during arguments. "I know people, Rachel," he'd say. "Do you?" Every time he said it, my stomach turned to ice. As the months passed, his control grew tighter. I stopped wearing certain clothes because he didn't like men staring. I stopped posting on social media because he said our lives should be private. My world shrank until it was just work, home, and whatever mood Daniel was in when I walked through the door. And yet to everyone else, he was still the charming lawyer, the devoted husband. He brought flowers to my job, left sweet comments on photos, hosted dinners where he played the attentive spouse. Only Emma and I knew what happened when the guests left. Only Emma saw me flinch when his hand brushed my shoulder unexpectedly. I told myself I could endure it until she was older, until I had a plan. I thought I was protecting her by staying quiet, by absorbing his temper so she wouldn't have to. I didn't realize that silence was a kind of permission. I didn't realize Emma was already protecting me in her own way. The stakes weren't just my marriage or my job. They were my daughter's safety, her sense of what love should look like, her belief that home was a place where she was safe. And Daniel was poisoning all of it. Daniel's family had a way of making cruelty look like tradition. The first time I met them at a Sunday dinner, I thought they were simply blunt, the kind of people who tell it like it is. I learned quickly that it wasn't honesty, it was sport. Margaret, Daniel's mother, was the ringleader. She had the sharp eyes of someone who cataloged weaknesses and filed them away for later use. She rarely spoke without a smile, but the words under that smile were knives. "Rachel, dear, I suppose nursing is respectable," she'd said, as if she were commenting on the weather. "Still, such a shame you didn't pursue something more elevated." Susan, Daniel's sister, had inherited her mother's talent for backhanded compliments. At family gatherings, she'd slide up beside me and whisper things like, "You have such a nice figure for someone who works such long shifts," as if I should be shocked my body hadn't completely fallen apart. Victor, the older brother, preferred more obvious jabs. "You're not like the women Daniel dated before," he'd say over dinner, smirking. They were, let's just say, more polished. Daniel never corrected them. Sometimes he'd even join in, adding a laugh to show he was one of them. The gatherings were a test, and I was always failing. Emma was always quiet at these dinners, eating with her head down, but I knew she was listening. She heard every insult, saw every time I swallowed my pride instead of firing back. She also noticed the subtler things, how Daniel pulled out chairs for his mother, but never for me, how he poured wine for Susan and Margaret, but handed me my glass without looking. At first, I thought the worst thing about his family was their words. I didn't realize how much influence they had over Daniel. When Margaret complained that I kept Rachel too busy to host properly, Daniel started insisting I work fewer shifts. When Victor joked that I needed a little more polish, Daniel began commenting on my clothes and hair before we went out. It was as if their approval was the currency Daniel valued most, and he was willing to spend me to get it. The isolation was gradual but effective. Friends stopped dropping by because Daniel made it clear he didn't like unannounced visitors. I stopped inviting my own parents to events because I couldn't stand the way Margaret looked down her nose at my father, a retired detective. who still wore worn leather jackets and spoke plainly. My world narrowed until it fit neatly inside the expectations of the Miller family. And yet the insults never stopped. The more I complied, the more they pushed. They called it tough love when they criticized my cooking, my posture, even the way I laughed. They called it just joking when they made comments about my humble background. The truth was they didn't want me to belong. They wanted me to know I never would. Emma began to change during this time. She was only 10, but there was a new sharpness in her eyes, a kind of quiet calculation that worried me. She watched everyone Daniel, his family, me with the same careful attention. When Margaret said something particularly cutting one evening, Emma's gaze flicked from her grandmother to me, as if taking mental notes. I thought she was just learning how to survive in this family. I didn't realize she was building something else entirely. Looking back, I can see that this was where the roots of the darkness truly lay, not just in Daniel's temper, but in the family culture that excused it, nurtured it, and disguised it as tradition. They had been teaching Daniel his whole life that control was love, that cruelty was honesty, and that anyone outside their circle was disposable. I married into that without understanding the cost. Emma understood sooner than I did. By the time fall rolled around, the tension in our house had become a living thing. It moved between rooms, settled into corners, and waited for the smallest spark to ignite it. Daniel's temper was unpredictable, but I had learned the signs, the sharp way he shut a cabinet, the too long silence after I spoke, the subtle narrowing of his eyes when something displeased him. In September, the sparks began flying more often. One evening I came home from a long shift to find him standing in the kitchen holding an empty coffee bag. "You forgot the espresso roast again," he said, his voice low. I started to apologize, but he stepped closer, crowding me against the counter. "Do you ever listen? Or are you too tired from playing nurse to strangers?" His hand gripped my arm hard enough to leave a shadow of his fingers the next day. I told myself to keep my voice calm, to avoid giving him more reason to escalate. Emma was upstairs. She didn't need to hear this. But she did. She always did. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, Emma sat at the table watching me. "Mom," she said quietly, "why do you get so small when he's mad?" The question stopped me cold. "Small, like you're trying to disappear," she explained, her eyes never leaving my face. I forced a smile and told her, "Sometimes staying quiet keeps the peace." She didn't look convinced. In October, the argument started bleeding into family gatherings. At his cousin's birthday dinner, Daniel corrected me sharply in front of everyone when I misremembered the name of a law firm. "You really should pay attention, Rachel," he said, chuckling as if it were a joke. His family laughed. Emma's gaze darted between us, her jaw tight. Later that night, I heard her in her room talking softly into her tablet. When I asked her about it, she said she was working on a school project. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, the conflict escalated again. Daniel came home early and found me helping Emma with her science homework. He wanted dinner ready. I said it would be in 20 minutes. That was the wrong answer. He slammed the kitchen door so hard the frame shook, then accused me of caring more about playing teacher than about him. Emma stood in the doorway watching silently as he berated me. I tried to send her to her room, but she refused. "Stop yelling at her," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Daniel froze, staring at her like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Then he laughed short, humorless. "You're getting mouthy just like your mother." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. I knew what came after it. But Emma didn't flinch. She just stood there holding my gaze as if she were daring him to do something in front of her. From then on, I noticed her watching him more closely. Her tablet was often nearby, open and angled in ways I didn't think about at the time. She asked me questions about Grandpa, my father, Jack Miller, like how far away he lived, how often we talked, whether he still helped people like he used to. I told her he was retired, but still knew how to get things done. She nodded, storing the information away. Meanwhile, Daniel seemed to sense his control slipping, and it made him more aggressive. He criticized me more in front of Emma, knowing it cut deeper. He joked about sending her to live with his mother if she didn't learn to show respect. By the week of Thanksgiving, the air in our house felt like it was vibrating with unspoken threats. I didn't know exactly what was coming, but I knew something was building. Emma knew it too. 2 nights before Thanksgiving, I found out just how much Emma had been paying attention. I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through a pile of unpaid bills when she appeared in the doorway clutching her tablet the way most kids might hold a favorite stuffed animal. "Mom," she said carefully, "I need to tell you something." I looked up expecting a question about homework. Instead, she sat across from me, eyes steady in a way that made her seem older than her 11 years. "I've been recording him," she said. I blinked. "Recording who, Daniel?" she replied without hesitation. "When he yells at you. When he grabs you. When he says you're stupid." My mouth went dry. "Emma, I have videos," she cut in her voice, calm, almost clinical. "And audio. I've been keeping them on the tablet, but they're also saved to Grandpa's email, just in case." My heart lurched. "You can't—" "I already did," she said, her voice firm. "Grandpa knows. He said he's proud of me." I stared at her, torn between fear and a strange surge of relief. "Emma, do you have any idea how dangerous—" "I know exactly how dangerous," she interrupted. "That's why I've been careful. That's why I didn't tell you until now. Because I need you to understand that we're not alone anymore." I sat there, unable to find words. My father, a retired police captain, had been out of our lives for a while, partly because Daniel didn't like him, and partly because I didn't want him to worry. Now I realized Emma had quietly gone around me, building her own line of defense. "He's coming on Thanksgiving," she said, almost casually. "He told me he'd rather see for himself than just hear about it." I felt a chill run through me. "Emma, this isn't—" "It is," she said, her gaze unflinching. "You told me once that brave people are scared but do the right thing anyway. This is the right thing." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scold her for taking such a risk. Another part wanted to thank her for being braver than I had been for years. The next day, Daniel was in an unusually good mood. He talked about the Thanksgiving dinner as if it were a performance he'd been rehearsing for. "My whole family will be there," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "We're going to show them how perfect everything is." His eyes locked on mine. "No mistakes, Rachel. None." Emma was sitting at the counter, seemingly focused on her cereal. But I caught the quick glance she gave me, the unspoken message in her eyes. "It's almost time." That night after Daniel went to bed, Emma brought me her tablet. She played a video from just 3 days earlier. Daniel shoving me against the refrigerator, his voice sharp and cruel over something as small as me forgetting to defrost chicken. Watching it, I felt sick. Not just because of what it showed, but because I knew it wasn't the worst. "This is enough, right?" Emma asked quietly. "Enough for people to believe you. Enough for Grandpa to do something?" I knotted my throat too tight to speak. I wanted to tell her we could go to the police right now, but I also knew how Daniel would spin it. I needed him to lose control in front of witnesses. And on Thanksgiving, he would have a whole room of them. Thanksgiving morning started like a stage play. Daniel was the director, barking instructions, as if our home were a set and we were actors hired to make him look good. He ironed his shirt twice, polished his shoes until they shone, and walked through the dining room adjusting silverware placements as though a crooked fork could ruin his image. "We are the perfect family today," he said, pausing in the hallway to look at Emma and me. "Perfect. Got it." I nodded. Emma did too, but there was something in her eyes, steady, watchful, that Daniel didn't catch. He was too focused on the arrival of his family. By noon, the house was buzzing with voices and the smell of roasted turkey. Margaret arrived first, sweeping in with a sharp-eyed inspection of the room before she even took off her coat. "Oh, Rachel," she said, smiling tightly. "I see you've gone for a rustic look this year." Susan and Victor followed with their spouses, each carrying expensive bottles of wine, each offering a kiss on Daniel's cheek and a perfunctory nod to me. They settled in, filling the air with small talk and subtle barbs. Emma moved quietly from room to room, her tablet tucked under one arm. I assumed she was playing games, but now I know she was watching, listening, waiting. At 1 p.m., my father texted me for the first time in months, "Traffic's heavy. See you soon." My pulse quickened. He hadn't said he was coming directly to me, but the message was enough. Emma must have told him everything, and now he was on his way. Daniel poured himself a drink and sat with Victor laughing about old college stories. Margaret cornered me in the kitchen. You know, dear, you really should consider going back to school. Daniel deserves a wife who can keep up with him. I swallowed the sting and kept basting the turkey. In the dining room, I could hear Susan joking with Emma about how quiet little girls make the best wives someday. Emma didn't answer. Later, when I passed her in the hallway, she whispered, "It's almost time." Around 3 p.m., the first real crack appeared. Margaret was complaining about how the mashed potatoes looked a bit lumpy, and Daniel, without missing a beat, said, "Rachel's never been much of a cook." The table erupted in polite laughter. Emma set down her fork. "That's not true," she said simply. Daniel's eyes snapped to her. "Emma," he warned, "we don't talk back to adults." But she didn't look away. "It's not talking back if it's the truth." The tension was a thread pulled tight across the room. Margaret tutted. Susan rolled her eyes, and Victor chuckled under his breath. Daniel smiled, but I recognized it. It wasn't amusement, it was the calm before his temper broke. What none of them saw was Emma's hand resting lightly on her tablet ready. I didn't know if she planned to play a video or say something, but I could feel her gathering her moment. And outside, somewhere in the growing dusk, my father's car was getting closer. By the time dessert plates were cleared, my nerves were wound tight. Daniel had spent the entire meal alternating between subtle digs at me and boastful stories that made him the center of attention. His family fed off it, tossing in their own jabs as if we were all part of some cruel sport. Emma stayed unusually quiet, her gaze moving from face to face like she was recording every word in her mind. When Daniel made another joke about my limited career ambitions, something in me shifted. I didn't plan it, but the words came anyway. "Funny you should say that," I said, my voice steady, "considering you've made it your mission to stop me from finishing school." The room stilled for a fraction of a second before Victor laughed. "Oh, come on, Rachel, don't start with that feminist nonsense." Daniel's eyes darkened. "Enough," he said sharply, the warning clear. But I didn't back down this time. "No, not enough. I'm tired of pretending this is a perfect family. I'm tired of smiling while you tear me down in front of our daughter." Emma's eyes widened slightly, not with fear, but with something closer to readiness. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Rachel," he said in that dangerously calm tone I knew too well, "we'll discuss this later." "No," I replied, my voice firm. "We'll discuss it now, in front of the people who've watched you do it for years and said nothing." A murmur went around the table. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Susan frowned. Daniel's control began to crack. "You don't want to embarrass yourself," he said. I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not the one who should be embarrassed." That's when Emma spoke. "She's right." Every head turned to her. She sat straight, her hands folded neatly on the table, her tablet in front of her. "You should be embarrassed, Dad." "Because I've been keeping track." Daniel's face drained of color. "Keeping track of what?" "Of everything," Emma said evenly. "The yelling, the names, the times you shoved her. I have it all right here." She tapped the tablet, and the faint sound of a recording began to play, Daniel's voice sharp and cruel, berating me over something trivial. The room went silent except for the audio. He lunged for the tablet, but I stood moving between them. "Don't," I warned. "You touch her, and this doesn't stay in the family anymore." His family exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't know yet that Emma had already made sure it wouldn't stay private. For the first time in years, I saw him hesitate, not out of kindness, but because he wasn't sure he still had the upper hand. And that hesitation was all I needed. The sound of tires crunching on the driveway cut through the tense silence. Daniel froze mid-step. Emma didn't move, her fingers resting on the tablet like it was a trigger. "Who's here?" he demanded, but I didn't answer. A knock came, sharp, deliberate. Daniel's bravado returned in a flash. "Probably another neighbor wanting to wish us a happy holiday," he said, forcing a smile as he walked toward the door. But when it opened, the air in the room shifted. My father stood there, flanked by two former colleagues from the police department. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me, then at Emma, then at the red mark still faint on my cheek from where Daniel had grabbed me earlier. "Rachel," he said quietly. Are you ready to go? Daniel stepped forward, puffing himself up. Captain Morris, there's been a misunderstanding. Sit down. My father interrupted, his voice so cold and authoritative that Daniel actually obeyed. The rest of his family sat, frozen eyes darting between us. My father crossed the room, bent slightly to look Emma in the eye, and asked, Are you hurt? She shook her head. But Mom is. Inside, his jaw clenched. I've seen the videos, he said, turning to Daniel. All of them. Daniel's composure cracked. She's a child, she doesn't understand. She understands more than you ever did. My father cut in. He glanced at the two officers. You have the paperwork? One of them stepped forward, placing a restraining order on the table. Mr. Carter, he said formally, you are to vacate this residence immediately and have no contact with Rachel or Emma. Daniel's mother gasped. His brother muttered something about bad timing. My father's gaze swept over them. You all knew, he said flatly. You watched it happen. You let it happen. That makes you part of it. No one spoke. Daniel's hands balled into fists. You can't just, we can, the officer interrupted. And we will. Emma picked up her tablet and set it gently in front of Daniel. Do you want to see the one from Tuesday? She asked. The one where you threw the glass. He stared at her, something like fear flickering behind his eyes. My father put a hand on my shoulder. Get your things, both of you. As I walked past Daniel, he said, Rachel, please, we can fix this. I stopped just long enough to look him in the eye. No, you don't get to break something for years and fix it with words. We left him sitting at the table, surrounded by his silent, useless audience, the weight of his own actions finally sinking in. The first night at my father's house felt like breathing after years underwater. The guest room was small, but it was warm, safe, and quiet, so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat without the constant hum of tension that had lived in my chest for years. Emma slept in the room next to mine, and every so often I'd hear her turn over or sigh, and I knew she was there. We were both still whole. The next morning, over pancakes my father made from scratch, Emma handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a printout of her evidence log, complete with dates, times, and short descriptions. You can give this to your lawyer, she said. My throat tightened. Emma, this is meticulous. She smiled faintly. Grandpa says preparation wins battles. Over the following weeks, I met with lawyers, signed the divorce papers, and began the process of reclaiming the house in my life. Daniel didn't fight much, not after the evidence came out in court. He received a 2-year sentence for domestic assault and a permanent restraining order. He also lost his job when the local paper published the trial coverage. His family distanced themselves almost immediately, suddenly concerned about reputation and privacy. I didn't care. My focus was Emma. With the constant fear gone, she began to relax in ways I hadn't realized she'd been holding back. She laughed more. She read aloud to me at night. She started drawing again, pictures of us in bright colors, always smiling. I enrolled in the nursing program I'd abandoned years earlier, determined to build a career that would allow me to support us both without depending on anyone like Daniel again. At first, it was hard to believe we were free. Some mornings, I still woke up bracing for the sound of his footsteps. But slowly, the memory stopped running the show. Therapy helped for both Emma and me. My counselor told me trauma steals your voice. Healing is about getting it back. She was right. I started speaking up in small ways, telling the barista when they got my order wrong, correcting people when they mispronounced my name. Each time, I felt a little stronger. One afternoon while I was studying at the kitchen table, Emma came in holding a flyer from school. Mrs. Clark wants to know if you'll talk to our class about resilience, she said. The idea terrified me, but I said yes. A week later, I stood in front of 20 curious faces and told them what it meant to be brave. Not fearless, but brave. I told them about the importance of asking for help, of speaking up when something's wrong, even if you think no one will believe you. I didn't mention Daniel's name, but I saw Emma watching me from her desk, her chin lifted, her eyes bright. That was the day I realized my voice wasn't just back, it was stronger than ever. And it was mine. 3 years have passed since that Thanksgiving, but the memory of it is etched into me like a scar that no longer hurts, but never fully fades. Daniel will be released from prison soon. People sometimes ask me if I'm afraid, but the truth is, I'm not. The restraining order is still in place. And more importantly, I'm not the same woman I was when I lived in that house. I'm stronger now, louder, more certain of my worth. And I have a daughter who knows that her voice matters no matter who tries to silence it. Emma is 12 now. She still has the old tablet, though she uses it mostly for school. The recordings are stored in 3 separate places, encrypted and protected. She tells me it's just in case. Sometimes I wish she didn't feel the need to be so cautious, but I also know it's part of who she's become, a protector, just like my father. I graduated from nursing school last year and now work in the ER. I see women come in with injuries they call accidents the same way I used to. I see children with the same quiet, watchful eyes Emma had at 9. I talk to them when I can. I ask questions others are too busy to ask. And sometimes I tell them about a little girl who gathered proof and changed the course of her family's life. When Emma was younger, I told her brave people aren't the ones who never get scared, they're the ones who act, despite the fear. I think about that often. We broke the cycle not because we weren't afraid, but because we decided fear wouldn't be the thing that decided our future. The hardest part wasn't leaving Daniel, it was leaving the version of myself that believed I couldn't. Looking back, I see how much of my silence was taught to me. Growing up, I learned that family problems stayed behind closed doors, that loyalty meant enduring anything. That's the cycle I refuse to pass on. Emma will never think love means making yourself smaller. She will never think respect has to be earned through suffering. The day Daniel gets out, I expect he'll try to reach out, probably through letters again. But I've already decided what I'll do. I'll throw them away unopened. Emma says she doesn't need an apology from him. I just need him to remember I wasn't afraid to make him face consequences, she told me last week. She's right. Consequences are the only language some people understand. I've learned that ending a toxic cycle isn't just about escaping. It's about building something new in its place. Our apartment is small, but it's filled with laughter and music and light. Emma's friends come over without her worrying what mood someone will be in. I cook without fear of criticism. We disagree sometimes, but we talk it through instead of yelling. This is what family should feel like. If someone reading this is where I was back then, scared, unsure, convinced that leaving will be worse, please know this, it isn't easy, but it is possible. You can leave. You can rebuild. And you can teach your children that love doesn't hurt, that home is supposed to be a safe place. You don't have to wait for a perfect moment. You just have to decide the next moment will be different. Emma and I didn't just survive Daniel. We outlived the version of ourselves that let him define us. And that's the greatest victory of all.